Hi, welcome to Backup Copies for the Unitrends System Administration course. By the end of this module, you'll be able to configure hot and cold backup targets. You'll also be able to create and manage backup copy jobs. First, let's take a look at backup copy in an overview. Unitrends supports multiple options for storing backup copies of your backups. For longer-term retention and disaster recovery, there's two concepts there. So one of the first things you want to kind of do is copy your backups to a cold target. That provides removable, inexpensive storage for more of the long-term retention. It could be NAS, tape, SAN, or our RxDA, our Recovery Archive Unit. We learn about those in the fundamentals in doing more with your backups module. You can also send backup copies to a hot target. They're effortlessly sent over the WAN to a variety of cloud options. No Limits Cloud, Forever Cloud, and it could be a third-party cloud as well. And the third option is copying backups to a hot target. That's a second managed location with Unitrends already running. This is a hot target that allows for hot recovery off-site. How you use your backup copies helps you meet your disaster recovery plan and your long-term retention strategy. The cost of ownership is really the driving factor in building out whatever strategy you're going to use. If you're following more of a compliance, then you're really going to want to make sure you're going off to a cold target. It allows you to copy backups off your appliance to different media types that can be relocated off-site for long-term retention and disaster recovery. Cold targets allow you to do both. Cold backup copies must be imported back to the appliance for recovery. Once they're imported back on the appliance, it's normal local recovery to put those backups back. Now, for faster off-site recovery times, if you're more compliant for quicker recovery, you're tracking how long it takes to bring your servers and all the services that those servers run up, then you really want to make sure you're going off to a hot target. It supports the automatic WAN transfer of the backups to the off-site appliance or the cloud. You just got to make sure you have enough network bandwidth to support the transfer of the data that you need to send over. That's based on the amount of change rate that you have. Backup copies can be recovered directly from the hot targets to assets registered on the hot target too, right? So if you want to put back VMware, SQL, Exchange, SharePoint, you register those servers once they're up, or you get VMware off-site, you register to your target, and all those backups you're copying over to that hot target can go right to that VMware host. Bring the servers up, register the agents, and start putting back your databases. Or if you have application aware, everything will come back. The next thing you kind of want to look at is you really need to identify where you want to send your backup copies. And then you got to start to configure your targets that you're going to use for the backup copies. Then you're going to configure your backup copy targets in each of your appliances. Now for your hot targets for the disaster recovery, once again, the hot target can receive backup copies from a local appliance, right? They could be running in your own private network, or you can send them to the Unitrends cloud. Now, cold target, once again, that's that long-term retention and disaster recovery. And once again, a cold target can receive backup copies from a local or a hot target. You can send backup jobs or backup copies. You can send backup copies from a hot target directly to cold storage. So for partners, that's pretty key. If you have end users or customers that are making that send their backups to you on your hot targets, you can now create cold long-term storage for them based on the copy job sitting on your target. And here's a quick list of the objects you can go off to for cold targets. It includes NAS, eSATA, USB. Once again, we got to make sure supported appliances, some support USB, most of them support eSATA. You can also go off to the cloud, any attached disk, or directly to a SAN as well too as a cold target. Support for different backup copy targets varies by the appliance model, as I mentioned for eSATA and USB. You really want to make sure you're checking that Recovery Series data sheet for Archiving Controller section for more information. You want to configure backup copy jobs to meet your needs, and here's an example for you. With the RxDA, it's removable media once again. It's that 4-port archive recovery unit we sell. You could put, as we learned earlier, 2 bays to one appliance and 2 bays to another if you have multiple local appliances. In this example here, we've got all 4 ports going from one appliance. Now, the first thing you're going to do is create your backup copy job for each cold target, which includes all of your assets you want to copy over to that removable media. All right, you're going to test the capacity to make sure that data set that you created, whether I'm doing just the fulls only, the fulls and incrementals, and I'm going off to a certain disk size or disk set, does this data set fit on the disk set? You want to make sure you test that. All right, then you're going to go ahead and create that job, leave the media in there. When that job is scheduled to run, it'll copy that data set to that media. You'll go ahead and remove that media out. Here's another example. You're going to create a backup copy job for each cold target, which includes the asset once again. Make sure you create them in groups based on the data set size and dependencies. All right, so if you have a SQL database, you might want to grab the virtual host for the SQL database, the SQL databases, the domain controller. If you're trying to create, a disk that you can recover an application off of, make sure you're getting the dependencies for that application as well, too. All right, once again, test that media to make sure that data set will fit on the disk set that you have in the unit. You'll go ahead and schedule that job off and write that data set off. It doesn't have to be all assets or nothing. It's really customizable in there. You'll see it in the demo piece. Here's another example of creating a backup copy job that's multi-purpose. In the first example here, you're going to create a backup copy job for all the groups and assets based on their types to be copied from the local source to the hot target. All right, so we're going to be creating those backup copies over the WAN to a secondary hot site running Unitrends. All right, so that first job goes over and it starts to copy those jobs and keep them up to date based on the local backups. That job keeps running constantly. As you receive new backups on site 1, they get copied to site 2 and updated and so on. But then you can go ahead and create a cold backup copy job to go to your cold based on the hot targeted location at site 2. And you can include and mix and match whatever assets you want to send off and create them by groups, as we showed you in examples 1 and 2 as well. You can copy those off to a NAS, removable media, any kind of storage like that is available too. In this example, we're just showing you how to use a NAS. Let's take a look at configuring backup copy cold targets. To support backup copy cold targets, they require adequate storage space for the backups, obviously. Depending on what type of media, you always want to make sure you're testing that media so you know your data set's going to fit on it. That media always has to be connected to the local source appliance that you're going to use. If you're going to create the backup copy from the hot target, that media has to be connected to the hot target physically. Whether it's a virtual appliance and you're connecting it through the virtual hypervisor, or it's a physical Recovery Series appliance, that media has to be physically connected to that appliance. You must also have a reserved directory available off the appliance for mounting the archive in the temp. That's the temp directory that it uses through the cold backup copy process. Now, there are a few considerations based on cold backup copy target type. For the NAS, we only support CIFS and NFS. For eSATA and USB, you must prep the drives before using any drive. And if you're going to put them in an RxDA, you're going to span across them RAID 0. All drives must be equal. If you have multiples, they treat as single logical drive. In the cloud, you must set up an account with Google Amazon S3 Rackspace first. There is a KB article out there for you, 3649. There's also a bonus note there that says Amazon's S3 RRS is not supported. We don't support that service currently today. Just regular Amazon S3, not RRS. You also must create your bucket, and your bucket out there, the name of it It does have a limitation. Make sure you check out the administrator guide for the full list of limitations. Those change constantly, so keep up to date with the administrator guide if you're going to be going out to a cloud as a cold backup copy target. Now, the speed of this copy is really going to depend on the memory and the network bandwidth and the file sizes and the changes once again. So, it's not the fastest process, but it does work. You want to make sure you monitor the amount of data copied because you pay for storage out there. Sometimes it can get out of your budget. You want to make sure you're considering setting thresholds to avoid, those unplanned, holy cow, what just happened there, charges. Make sure you set those thresholds if you do have a tight budget. Now, you can also go off to attached disk. It's not supported on the recovery series. That attached disk, once again, is for the virtual appliances, for UB. Now, we can go off to a SAN on a LAN. You do need to make sure you set that up with iSCSI or the fiber protocol to make sure that properly works. Now, let's take a look at configuring backup copy hot targets. Now, a Unitrends appliance is a backup copy target. You're going to see it in the demo. It's just a change in the edit settings for the appliances themselves. You turn it on as a backup copy target. Once again, our physical appliances, they can be both a local backup source and a hot copy target, but the UB can only be one or the other, not both. Right? UB on Linux can also be both, by the way, because you're putting our virtual software, you're putting our software directly on your own hardware, so you can have those eSATA ports and things like that to go off to for cold targets too. Right. It does at least require 128 gigabyte of available backup storage space. To do some work in there as a target, it does require some backup storage. It also requires a secure VPN tunnel. It's going to be created during the configuration. I'm going to show you that in the demonstration piece. It's extremely easy now compared to the old wizards we used to have to run in the legacy UI. And you also need to make sure you have a subnet that's not already in use to set all this stuff up for the OpenVPN subnet that it's going to create and use. Now, to configure your secondary Unitrends appliance as a target, you're going to enable it, as we mentioned, as a backup copy target through configuring the appliance. You're going to know the network IP address, the net mask, the secure port. There's a list of ports in the admin guide that you need to have open for prerequisites before you set all this up. Those change and are changing here in the future, so make sure you check the administrator guide for the ports that are needed to open up as target services between these two networks before you try to set this up. Now, you're going to add the backup copy target to your local source by host name and IP, the public IP. Make sure you have those ports open between them. The system is all scripted. It's going to go through and configure the tunnels between the appliances. Then you go over to the offsite target and you configure the local source. You allow copies to be sent from that source. Now, you have to wait between those steps because it can take a few minutes as well, too. So be patient with this process. It is all scripted, as I mentioned, but just between these steps of 1, 2, and 3, give it 5-10 minutes between each one. You can also add management credentials so you can access the source from the target as well. This is optional. If you want remote management back and forth, it's a good idea to turn this on. You can log into your target and see both sides of your fence, basically. You can see both appliances, manage both appliances through one interface. We call it the single pane of glass. Now, you can also tune these settings as needed. We're going to take a look in those more details in the next slide. But you're ready to start creating your backup copy jobs at this point once you see that your target is now online and it's ready to go. It's green. Once again, we're going to show you that in the demonstration piece. Now, the secondary appliance backup copy connection options, there's a few things you want to pay attention to in here. There's what's called the backup schema. It determines the order to copy over to the target. The most recent setting is our default. It's our recommended setting. It's only going to send the most recent over there first and keep what it can of the DR copy, basically, the newest full and the backup group that goes with it. There's also a setting in there for max retention. It's going to keep as many backup copies as it can over there until it needs to purge on its own. You can control the retention settings separately on a target. And there is a manual setting in the legacy interface only. You have to tell it every backup that you want to copy over manually. It's a pain in the butt. Nobody uses it. We don't recommend it at all. But if you do need to handhold a certain machine, you only want to send copies over every once in a while, you don't want them to go every time, you can just send them over manually through the legacy interface. There's also the concurrency. It's your max concurrent connection. It determines how many connections it's going to use at once when it creates those copies between the appliances. Our default is 2. You can add more if needed. Just remember that it comes off your 10 total. So if you're going to use 4 for replication, you're only going to use 6 for backups. By default, our UB appliances, they have 10. Our physical appliances vary based on the appliance size. Once again, check those models in the data sheet for how many concurrent connections each of those appliances have through the model chart. There's also throttling. Allows you to set that bandwidth throttling to limit the backup copy traffic during peak hours. It allows you to use a percentage, time of day, and the time of week, too. It's really cool how it works. We're going to show you that when we get in there, too. But if you want to keep your traffic down during the day, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, you know that's your heavy local traffic. People are on the network. They're using the internet. You want to save traffic during the day, you can throttle it down. You can also suspend backup copies from happening to a hot target as well, too, if you need to. Now, you do that from the source. Maybe you're rebooting your target, you're updating your target, you want to suspend services on your local for a little while. You get your target back up, you reboot it, you upgrade it, whatever you're doing to it, and then you go ahead and resume that backup copy process as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at configuring your backup copy jobs in a little bit more detail. Now, how they work first is they're only successful if you have local backups on your appliance that are green or yellow. We don't create any backup copy jobs for any red failed backups. Now, when a backup copy job runs, all new backups for the selected assets are copied to the target. Now, when a local backup runs for a hot, that happens automatically. All right. Now, for cold jobs, it's based on a schedule. It'll run, you can schedule these on certain times. Once again, we'll see that when we get in the demo. Now, incremental backups are synthesized into daily differential backups for all assets that are included in a scheduled backup copy job, whether it's hot or cold. Now, only one copy of a backup can exist on the target system at a time. Right? We're not going to take the same backup and keep multiple copies of the same backup. And probably the biggest note in here is that the target system, it needs to have adequate space. Right? If not, it's going to follow the schema. We're going to talk about that a little bit more detail in the next slide. Once again, you can manage retention settings for each selected asset on that hot copy target. And by selecting different media and rotating different media at different times, that long term is incredible for managing retention settings. You don't have, there's no settings for it, but you keep as many disks out for as long as you want to on the cold targets. Now, encryption is supported with both hot and cold backup copies as well. Now, what should the system do if the target is full? Is a setting that you can set in here for the cold. You can specify in the backup copy job settings what you want to do. Do you want to delete older backup data to free the space up? Or do you want to fail the backup copy job and send me an alert? Pay attention to those settings because it's going to determine the success of going off to that cold target. And once again, this is only a setting for going off to a cold target. We also look at configuring backup copy jobs. We want to make sure we create the backup copy job that includes, once again, all assets that you want to copy to that target. It's huge. If you forget to select that asset in that copy job, it never gets off to that media. It's not part of your DR, and it's not part of your long-term retention strategy. You also want to make sure you specify, once again, that threshold in the cloud, if you have one. Don't go over budget. Don't have it become a money nightmare. Once again, job scheduling, it's automatic. Copies are made from following queued schema. Once again, the recency, the max retention manual. Make sure you're paying attention to those schemas when you set up that first hot job or when you set up that connection. Make sure you pay attention to the schema that you want to use. It is automatically going to set it to the recency. There are a few best practices in here for us as well, too. We want to schedule cold target copy jobs around low utilization times. We don't want to run a big backup copy job to a cold target when we have a bunch of backups running already. The cold backup copy process is processor intensive on the appliances. You want to make sure you use the backup copy reports, the protection summary, the capacity report, and the hot target and cold target reports. There is one separate report for the past 24 hours as well, too, and there's a storage footprint. These are all great reports to help you manage the cold and hot backup copy jobs that you're going to run off from your appliances. We're going to take a look at those in the demo as well, too. Once again, if you're using third-party cloud, be sure to set those thresholds to avoid those unplanned costs. It'll get you. It's a big one for us. We have people calling us back all the time saying they forgot to set them, and once again, you want to make sure you're monitoring your growth to make sure you avoid running out of space on those targets as well, too. I showed you earlier in the ongoing administration demo where we added more storage to our target because the target was starting to run out of space. Keep on top of that kind of stuff. Take care of it right away when you start to see your storage going into that kind of yellow area. Next, we're going to take a look and watch the how-to video tutorial, and we're going to configure hot and cold backup copy targets and create and manage those backup copy jobs.